Hello and welcome to Fate Grand Order. When you first open this game, there's a lot going on. The game is trying to teach you a lot of things, and you probably don't have a fully developed grasp on the entire thing. So in this video, we're going to go over a bunch of topics and try to get you up to speed on how to master the menus and different layers of Fate Grand Order as a game, as well as teach you how to progress through that early part of the game when you're still learning your way through, in terms of your servants and how fast you should be going through the story and all these kinds of things. So let's go ahead and get into it because there's a lot to go over. When you open up the game, you're on this menu right here. In the top left corner, you can see this button labeled News. You can click that, and this is how you'll see upcoming maintenance periods. You can read patch notes, you can read about coming updates. Lots of good stuff in the News tab. I recommend checking it every so often. On the other side of the screen, you have this, which is kind of an abbreviated News tab. This will tell you about events that are currently going on, summoning banners that are currently going on, etc. Right underneath that, you have, if there is one going on, you'll have the event itself. You can click this to enter the event, play the quests associated with it. Events are really useful. There's several items, including the crystallized lore item, which you need to turn a skill from level 9 to level 10, that can only be obtained from events. Events will sometimes award free servants or free craft essences. Not free necessarily, but for the completion of the event itself. It's also a great way to obtain leveling materials, and we'll talk more about all of this as we go on. So events are really good, and if you have access to one, I recommend making it your main priority insofar as you're able. If it's too difficult for you, that's completely fine. Leave it. Go level up servants, go progress the main story, come back to it. They don't stay around forever, but there's almost always an event running, so if you miss one here or there as you're just getting into your account and building up your overall account strength, it's not the end of the world. Underneath that, you have this button called the Chaldea Gate. We're going to come back to this button much later. And then under that, you have all of your current story chapters as far as you have unlocked them. Yours will probably look not like that, but largely like this, with probably these couple. You'll have cleared Fuyuki by now in all likelihood, and Orleans will be available to you. Maybe if you've gotten a little bit further, Septum, and if you've gotten even further, Okeanos, etc. So from here you can go into the singularity or into the story chapter, and you can see the map thereof. Click on one of these, the story quest will be available. If you've cleared the story, you'll have these free quests that you can do to farm for leveling materials, as well as Saint Quartz, which is the summoning currency. So that is the important parts of the main menu as it's available here. The other main thing that I want to talk about while we are here, though, is this green bar in the bottom left, which is labeled AP. AP, or I think it's action points, is the stamina system for this game, and any quest that you run carries an AP, essentially fee associated with it, that will dictate how much you're able to play the game in any one session before you run out of AP and need to either restore it with these fruit items, which are given out occasionally. As you can see, this quest will cost 7 AP out of my 142 maximum. You have a master level, which is, as you can see for me, 150 out of 150. As your master level goes up, your maximum AP will go up as well. So if you're feeling especially limited right now, continue to level up, and eventually your AP bar will become bigger, and you won't be quite as restricted by it. So that's essentially the main menu. From here, you'll notice this button in the bottom right-hand corner labeled Menu, and this is how we go to the other screens of the game and engage with its other features. So the first one that we're going to explain is the Summon tab. So if we click on the Summon tab, we're brought to the screen where you can summon new servants. The first one you'll be brought to is usually the one on the furthest to the left. These are available for a limited time. They come associated with 4 and 5-star and lower servants and craft essences. 5-star is the maximum for anything in this game in terms of rarity from the Gacha. And for anything 4 or 5 stars, you'll need to come to these ones labeled Saint Quartz Summon. So this is your Saint Quartz right here. This is given out for logging in. This is given out for the completion of story quests, as well as event quests, as well as free quests. You can grind a couple of these for completing weekly missions every week. They're given out for promotions, maintenance reward, etc. There's many ways that you can build this up, although it will never seem fast enough, of course. So, 4 and 5-star servants and craft essences come from the Saint Quartz summon. There's another type of summon available on this summon menu. If we go all the way to the right, or from the far left, just one more to the left, you get the friend point summon. These are your friend points. You get these just for completing quests, specifically using your friend's servants, and we'll talk about the friend system in a little bit. The friend point summon features not only 4 and 5-star, and I clicked on this in the wrong order, but you get the idea, 4 and 5-star leveling materials, which is really nice to be able to get some of these without necessarily needing to farm for them. It also contains 3-star and below servants and craft essences. Every single day, you get 10 free summons off of this friend point summon, and I recommend doing them until you have basically as many 3-star servants as you need, which is essentially you should be shooting to get all of them. So you just click this button, press OK, and then you'll be taken into the screen where it will actually summon these things. And so on. You get the idea. Now that we've got some servants, we're going to go back into the menus, and this time we're going to go to the Enhance menu. This is where you come to improve the strength of your servants that you get from the Friend Point or Saint Quartz Summon Gacha. So the main one that we'll look at, or the first one that we'll look at, will be this top tab that says Servant. So if we press this tab, you'll see this menu. So from here you can select the servant that you want to level over on the left hand side, and then you will select the items that you want to use to level them on the right hand side. So if I press this button, we'll be taken in to see the servants that we have available. And you can see for me, some of these are already at max level, so we'll pick one of the ones who isn't. And then from there we can level them. So we'll select some items, and to that effect we're going to use the main form of leveling item in the game, which is called the Ember. You'll see this here. These items are called Hellfire or Blaze of Wisdom. The quest to summon them is called Ember Gathering, so that's where I got the name. Anyways, these are the main forms of EXP in the game. You do not actually get servant EXP for just completing quests with servants in this game. You get a different resource that we'll talk about later. This is how you level your servants. You can use like excess servants if you really, really want to, but doing so is not at all efficient, and the return on investment that you get in terms of the amount of EXP that you'll get from using other servants for leveling material is really, really low. So you want to be using these embers, and we'll talk about how to get them easier later. One interesting quirk is that if you use embers that are the same class as the servant that you're leveling, you get a bonus. So you can see I'm using a 5-star assassin ember on an assassin, and if I didn't and I instead used a saber ember, he would only go to level 16, where with the assassin ember he's going to level 18. So we'll go ahead and do that. and thus the servant is leveled and his stats go up accordingly. We'll go ahead and finish the level up all the way to his current level cap of 20. So there we go, now we have a level 20 servant on our hands. If we go back to the enhancement menu, there's a couple other tabs that are worth mentioning while we're here. One of those is the skill tab. From here you have a very similar menu. In fact, all the enhancement menus look very similar to the servant menu, the level up menu that we were just at, where we'll come over to the left and we'll select, and then we'll be able to see the skills that they have, in this case just this one, and the materials needed to level them. We also can see this thing down here, which I didn't mention, which is the QP required to do any form of enhancement. QP is essentially the game's main currency that you use to do anything. Think of it as like gold if you've played any other gacha game. It's the currency that you use to level everybody up, to increase their skills. Essentially, anything that you want to do as far as making a servant stronger is going to cost QP. We'll talk about how to farm QP a little later. There's another aspect to the leveling of skills specifically, which is these items. Items will change depending on servant to servant, and they will change. Each skill for each servant is the same list of items, but as we go up the leveling from 1 to 10, the quantity and type of item that is needed to increase each skill's level by 1 can change. So we'll go ahead and we have plenty of these assassin gems, so we'll go ahead and level our skill from level 1 to level 2. If we want to see what the skill does, we can hold it, or tap and hold rather, and we can see this description. It'll apply evade, which is a good skill for 1 turn, and increase critical strength for 3 turns. Those effects will be strengthened as we level the skill, not the evade because that's just a static effect, but the critical strength modifier will improve as we level the skill. So if we have the items that we need, we just press enhance. It goes through this nice animation, and at the end of it, we'll have a level 2 skill. If we level the skill to 6 and then again to 10, the cooldown number will be reduced by 1 and then 1 again at 6 and 10 respectively. So it's really important to level skills because not only does it make the skills stronger, but it means you'll have access to them more often, and in tough battles, both of those things are really important. Leveling skills is really expensive, and the items needed for them are sometimes hard to come by, but it's one of the most important ways to increase the viability and strength of your servants. The next tab, I mentioned them earlier, is the craft essences. In a lot of gacha games, you have like an equipment system where you can farm gear for a character. Like if you've played Epic 7 or Genshin Impact or some of these other games where you can farm like weapons and helmets and whatnot, FGO doesn't have that kind of system. The closest equivalent to it really is this craft essence system. And if you've played either of those games that I mentioned, there's a similar setup in both games where you can have, I think they're called artifacts in Epic 7. I don't know, you might be able to think of this as like the weapon that you put on your character in Genshin or something like that. So basically, once again, it looks essentially the same as the first menu, where we'll pick the craft essence that we want on the left and then we'll level it up on the right. So we'll go into this menu, we'll scroll down to grab the craft essence that we want, and we can tap and hold to once again see the effects thereof. In this case, our servant that we've been working on is an assassin. This craft essence, as they all do, will provide a flat stat bonus of some kind. Sometimes that's all HP, sometimes it's all attack, sometimes it's split in between, as well as an effect to the servant who has it equipped. In this case, it's going to increase the Noble Phantasm strength of the assassin class if it's equipped to an assassin by 15%. As the servant that we've been leveling is an assassin, this fits well enough. So then we'll come over here to the right-hand side, and we will apply a couple of these to level up the craft essence. As the craft essence level goes up, you can see the stat bonus associated with it goes way up. This is the main benefit to leveling craft essences. Now, if you're perceptive, you'll have noticed these 4 kind of diamonds underneath the level. That represents what's called the limit break system in this game. Let me show you what that looks like. So the limit break system is what you do in the event that you have more than one of the same craft essence. You can come to this menu and put your main copy of the craft essence on the left, put the spare copies in the right, and feed those spare copies to the main copy. Now what that will do is it will increase the craft essence's level cap up to a maximum of, depends on the rarity, if it's a 5-star, maximum of 100, which will increase the amount of bonus stats that you can get from the craft essence, which again is a good thing. It will also improve the effect that the craft essence grants, though. So in this case, we have a non-limit broken fragment of 2030 craft essence, which, as you can see, gains 8 crit stars each turn. Pardon me. If I instead load up the max limit broken version, you can see we're able to go to a higher level. You can also look at the effect and notice that it now gives us 10 crit stars each turn. Now that effect does not go up with each additional limit break. It only goes into effect once you have max limit broken the craft essence by feeding it 4 additional copies of itself. And servants have a similar system in place, only for servants it's called Ascension rather than limit breaking. So we'll come down here to the Ascension menu, and once again, it looks pretty familiar. So we'll load in the servant that we've been working on, and once again, just like for the skill menu, we'll see a list of items as well as a QP cost associated with the Ascension. The Ascension will do a couple of things that's good for us. One, it will improve the servant's level cap, in this case from 20 to 30. It will also do a couple other things. So we'll go ahead and activate the Ascension here, and I'll let you see. So that did a couple things. As you can see, it changed his look a little bit, and we can preview that by coming into the card and swiping back and forth. We can also go to the character skin menu and tap. These early servants didn't have the most imaginative differences between their ascensions, shall we say. But importantly, if we come to the status menu here, we can see that it raised the level cap, as we said. It also added another skill. So now instead of just having the one skill, he has a second one as well. So if we go back to the skill menu, and we want to look at our guy, we can now level this skill as well. And we can see the difference. This one is going to cost 4 assassin gems, this one is going to cost 2. By fully ascending a servant, you'll gain access to potentially all 3 of their skills, increase their level cap, and again, the ultimate final level cap is going to depend on rarity, the rarity of the servant. You'll also gain access to all potentially 3, or if they have extra skins, more than 3 different Ascension looks or costumes or skins, however you want to kind of phrase that. So all in all, Ascension is very good. Just like with skills, Ascension is going to cost QP as well as certain items, and the items might change from servant to servant, and generally they get more demanding as you go up the Ascension ladder. 1-star servants ascend very easily, 5-star servants not so much. The 4th Ascension is always harder than the 3rd, and so on. There are a few other menus here in this enhancement menu, but I'm going to leave those for you to look into and discover on your own time, with the one exception of the Noble Phantasm bar. The Noble Phantasm bar is what you do with extra copies of servants. Just like with craft essences, there's a system in place. If you get excess copies of the same craft essence, the Noble Phantasm menu right here is what you do when you get extra copies of the same servant. Every servant in the game has a Noble Phantasm, which will build up over the course of a battle, and then unleash when you decide to use it. It's usually the most powerful attack that a servant will have access to, but sometimes it's a very powerful support skill, or a big heal, or whatever. Massive set of buffs. It varies from servant to servant, but invariably they all become more powerful if you can feed extra copies of a servant to your original. So if I had another copy of our Assassin Kojiro, who we've been working on, I could feed the extra copy to the one that we're working on, and then his Noble Phantasm would deal more damage in battle. So the Noble Phantasm menu is really important. It's what you do with excess copies of servants. And it does not cost items, like Ascension and skill leveling. It just costs the excess servant themselves. And a little bit of QP as well. And as you can see, it would just, as these arrows indicate, it just is going to increase the amount of damage that is dealt when you use the Noble Phantasm. So that is the enhancement menu. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to return to the Chaldea Gate, which you can do either by pressing the close button, or if you're in one of the other menus, you also have this very useful terminal button that you can use to come right back here that does the same thing as the close button that we just used. Very useful. And what we're going to go over is the Chaldea Gate that we kind of skipped over. Now, when we were talking about upgrading servants a minute ago, I listed several items that are useful as far as Ascension materials, QP, embers. All of those things are going to be farmed right here in the Daily Quests menu. As it implies, these are going to rotate every day. The amount of time left that they're there is going to be displayed here in the right-hand corner. 21 hours in this instance. These red quests, these ember gathering quests, are going to be where you farm for most of your embers and leveling items. If you scroll down, you'll have access to these green quests. This is where you'll get those skill gems that we showed to level up skills, as well as some of the items that you need to perform those ascensions and skill levels, past just the basic pieces, monuments, gems, and stones. And then finally you have the orange quests down here. This is where you can farm QP. I have another video up about farming teams that you can build to conquer these quests pretty easily using just low rarity servants from a relatively early stage in your account's life cycle as well, that you can just build up and then farm these quests and make ember gathering and training grounds and treasure vault quests all very easy for you to just do consistently and quickly, and plunder them for lots of useful resources. So definitely take advantage of some of that. Also here in the Chaldea Gate, we've got the Interlude and Rank Up Quests menus. These are for essentially buffs that get released to various servants. So if I come into the Rank Up Quest menu, these are straight buffs that get released for servants that you can come in and do, and then it will improve one of their skills or improve the strength of their Noble Phantasm, as well as reward you a couple of Saint Quartz. The Interlude menu does not always grant a skill or a Noble Phantasm buff. Sometimes it's just an extra little bit of story pertaining to one of these servants. So you can, if you have a particular favorite servant, maybe they have an interlude where you can get a bit of story as it pertains just to them, get to know them a little bit better, and potentially come out of it with a Saint Quartz and potentially a Noble Phantasm or skill buff as well. So the Chaldea Gate is really good for a bunch of reasons. If you haven't done them already, of course, above these you will have a couple of missions pertaining to the acquirement, that's not the right word that I'm looking for, where you'll be able to unlock a couple of mystic codes, which are skills that you put on your master character that will grant you access to a couple different support skills that you can use on your servants during battle. Different mystic codes will come with different sets of skills that you might use for different options. Like there's one that's better for farming, there's one that's better for really difficult quests, there's one that's better for using small parties or just single servants in battle, etc. So definitely, if you have those mystic code quests up here above the daily quests, or I think that's where it is, it'll be somewhere here in this basic menu before you go into any of these options. Go ahead and get those done and unlock a couple extra mystic code options for yourself. Well, now that we have gathered up some servants from the summon menu and then enhanced them in the enhancement menu and farmed some materials from the Chaldea Gate, we have a more respectable looking roster. So we're going to go into the formation menu and talk about some of the things you can do in here. In the formation menu, you have just a couple options, in fact, only 4. The party setup menu is where you're going to come to build your different parties. You have 10 of these available to you. You can use them for any number of things. As you can see, I have my middle section, you can name them, set up to be mostly different types of event farming quests. I have my far left one set up to be my daily farming team that can farm the daily quests really easily, etc. So you can just come here, you can tap the lineup button and just move things around. You can set craft essences, different servants in different slots, etc. Once you're satisfied, you can hit OK. The support setup menu is a really important one, so let's go into that. Every account in this game has a certain number attached to it, and that number is going to dictate how people find you in this game. So, for example, if you check my description of this video, you'll see my account code, which will let you potentially send me a friend request, or would if I wasn't always full. But you would see this, basically, when you search my account code, which is right there. This is the list that comes up, and you, if you are my friend, are able to use these servants when you go into battle. You're able to select one of them to join in your party. So, the way that you set up your support list is what other people are going to see from you when you send them a friend request or when they find you. Essentially, this is how other people are going to come to know you. So this is really important for putting your best foot forward and trying to build out your friends list. Because having a strong friends list is really important in this game, actually. So you want to fill this out as much as you can. Even if you're just putting in servants just to hold the spot, that's fine. I can only speak for myself, but when I see somebody who sends me a friend request and they have like an empty support list, I'm like, okay, are you even trying? Are you even playing the game? Do you care at all? But if I see somebody who has like a level 3 servant in every one of these except for one of these categories or something, then I can tell, okay, you're making some kind of effort. If you have craft essences equipped, if you have like a leveled mash in your first slot, something like this, just some kind of indicator of effort is going to be a great way to convince the players that you're sending friend requests to that, hey, I'm serious and I'm trying my best and I'm not ready to field a fully leveled all 5-star support list like this, but I'm doing the best that I can with what I have. And that's, for a lot of players, I think that's important in determining whether or not they're going to accept your friend request. So fill this out as best you can with the servants that you have, even just the ones that you get from the friend point gacha, just to, again, make a good first impression. The Spirit Origin list is just shows you everything that you have, so it's not terribly, it doesn't really do anything that other menus don't also do, if you just want to see all the servants and embers and whatnot that you have. The second archive is where you're going to go to store things that you're not currently using. So this is my second archive, where I have placed my spare embers. These buttons over here control this, what you're doing, whether you're going from the second archive to the inventory. So if I press these, I could pull them from the second archive and put them into my main inventory where they'd actually be usable. Or if I want to take something from my inventory and put it into the second archive, I activate this button. There's a separate second archive, I should say, for craft essences and for servants / embers / foes. So if you have craft essences that you don't want to throw away, but you're not using currently, you can throw them here into the second archive. You can also expand both types of second archive storage through the shop menu, which is what we're actually going to talk about next. So let's go ahead and go to the shop menu. And from here, there's a couple good options. Now, the exchange event items, most events, as you farm them, you're going to farm like a specialized event currency that you can then come to that menu to exchange what you have in exchange for embers or mana prisms, which we'll talk about in just a second, or ascension materials, etc. You can also access that menu from the event itself most of the time. The next one below is the burning menu, which is where you're going to throw away stuff that you do not want. So if I had a couple of servants to burn, I could come here, select them, hit burn, and then I would get a little bit of QP for them usually. I do not recommend that you burn any servant that you have less than 5 copies of. You need 5 copies of a servant to fully max out their Noble Phantasm level in the Noble Phantasm Enhancement menu that we talked about earlier. So I recommend that you keep every servant until you have at least 5 copies of them. And you don't have to hold on to them until you have 5. If you got a second Kojiro, in my instance, you would just go straight to the NP menu, increases NP level by 1, and then etc. until you max them out to NP 5, and then when you start getting your 6th Kojiro, then you could come here and burn them. Also, while it's just here in front of me, you can press this button, which will lock things, which will prevent you from burning them by accident. So if you didn't want to get rid of something and were worried that you might accidentally do so, I recommend locking all of your servants and craft essences, again, until you get so many excess versions thereof that you are ready to just throw them away. On that subject as well, this is a game where low rarity servants are very much so worth keeping, worth investing in, worth using. Again, if I go back to my, if I go back to my formation and my party setup, you can see I obviously have a lot of high rarity stuff in my account. But if you look at my daily farming team, it's actually all 3-star and below servants. In fact, 2 of them are 1-star, even for somebody like me who has a lot stronger stuff. In theory, as far as rarity goes, I still use a lot of low rarity servants, and you should too. Once again, they're far easier to level, they are far easier to ascend, and many of them have really powerful skill sets and noble phantasms and effects and whatnot that makes them very worthwhile servants to actually use in regular gameplay, even if you have access to higher rarity stuff. So do not burn your low rarity servants just because they are low rarity. Keep them around, get them to Noble Phantasm level 5. I recommend leveling up a bunch of them. And just generally appreciating them more so than you probably would in most gacha games. Okay, going back to the shop menu, because there were some things here that I didn't speak on. The next most important thing that you can do here is the Exchange Mana Prisms menu. You'll get these items called Mana Prisms for completing quests every day, for finishing events, sometimes just for logging in. You can use these to buy some pretty good stuff from this menu right here. Arts card opener are a little bit intense for new players, so I'm going to skip over those. But these are skins or costumes for characters that you could buy. There's only a couple of them here right now. These are summoning tickets. This is just more summoning materials for you to use, and you can buy 5 of these every month for like 100 mana prisms, which is basically free. EXP cards. These are 4-star embers. I think there's 50 of these that you can buy once per month, and you don't have to farm for them. These are foes, which will... anything else here that I want to talk about? Not really. If you go into a servant, you'll notice right down here where it says 0.0 out of 1,000 and then 0.0 out of 1,000 under attack. Those are where you would put foes. Those will just be a flat stat increase of up to 1,000 that you can do for every servant in terms of their health and their attack stat. So this can, this is very useful for any servant, because show me a servant that doesn't want an extra 1,000 attack points or 1,000 health points or both. There isn't one. And this exchange mana prisms will be pretty much your main source of where you get your foes. You can get enough from the Da Vinci Mana Exchange shop right here to fully max out 1 servant every month. So you get 20 of these and 20 of these, 15 per one, so 15 times 20 is like 300. So like 600 mana prisms every month, and then you can max out the foes of, or the bonus stats for any 1 servant. Good stuff. Make sure to come here once a month and buy out most of the shop if you can. Resets on the first of every month. There's also the exchange rare prism shop, which you get rare prisms when you burn 4-star or 5-star servants, which is not really something that I recommend doing for most players, so you probably won't have all that many of those. Like if you have over 30 rare prisms, you're probably burning way too many 4 and 5-star servants. So don't worry about that one too much. As you complete quests, you will also get these white, not that one, pure prisms. You'll also get these white prisms just for completing story quests. You can come here and exchange those for any ascension material, basically. So if you are like desperate for divine leyline spiritrons, you could come here and exchange some of your pure prisms to get some more of those, enough to do the ascension or to level up the skill that you just feel like you need to do right now. These are ultimately a finite resource, because once you complete all story quests, you can't get any more of them. Or at least not that many more of them, so be very judicious and careful in your use of your pure prisms. As we mentioned earlier, you can expand your second archive right there. And then the Exchange St. Quartz Fragment is the last menu that we're going to talk about. As you complete weekly quests, you'll get these St. Quartz Fragments, which you can then come here, and you can exchange them for more regular St. Quartz. So for every 7 that you build up, you can get 1 extra St. Quartz, and in this way you can gain an extra 2 or 3 St. Quartz each week just for completing these weekly quests. If we go back to our main menu, I'll show you an example. We did this one earlier, so we can tap it, which fulfills it, and then we got 3 of them, so we're back up to 5 fragments now. So when I get 2 more, I can exchange them again for 1 more St. Quartz. Okay, the next menu is going to be the My Room menu. From here, you can do a couple of things. This is more... Pretty much everything that we've looked at so far is about like strengthening servants, and this is not. So from here, there's a couple things you can do. The material menu is where you're going to go to reread story quests and whatnot. So once again, that's main room, my room, and then material, and then main records. And you can see if you have a particular singularity that you really liked, you could come here and you could reread certain parts of it, or the whole thing. Also, the main interlude records is for some of the events that you've played. The servant records is for the actual interludes, which we showed off earlier, that you have completed, and you could reread here if you enjoyed them. And then the event quest log is for all other types of events that you have played through, and you could reread up to the point that you completed them. Also, here's the item list, which is just going to show you how many of each item you have. So if you're really curious how many secret saber gems you have, you could come here and find out, oh, I have 458. These are fairly self-explanatory, so I won't go over each one. You can change favorite to set which servant you want to see appear on the left-hand side here in the main room. You can tap on them and talk to them, interact with them. And if you desire to talk to somebody else, you can set them here, select OK, and do the same thing. There we go. So yeah, that's the My Room page. Okay, now we've got a fairly good grasp on many of the game's systems and menus and different things that you can do from different menus. So we're going to actually show kind of what it looks like to go into a quest and do actual stuff. I mentioned earlier that I recommend leveling a bunch of low rarity servants, especially while you're waiting for your Saint Quartz to pile up or for banners that you like to roll on. You won't have access to 4 and 5 star servants right from the get-go, except for the one that you get in the tutorial summon, of course, or if you really luck out early in your account's life cycle, which is definitely possible. So I'm gonna set up this support list right now with one low rarity servant in each class that I recommend that you level. And it is important to level servants in multiple classes, and we'll talk about why in just a second. So this is kind of my version of who I would recommend you invest in among the low rarity servants as far as when you're initially starting out. I think there are more useful servants in each class at the low rarities than the ones that I'm showing right now, but these are kind of like, if I could only have one 3-star or lower saber, archer, lancer, etc., these are the ones that I would choose. Caesar, as a saber, is very versatile, good critical star generator, as well as good damage, good support, really good servant. Uriel gets a massive bonus damage against males and has really large damage in general. Cucullin is extremely tanky and defensive and can survive for a really long time, as well as dealing decent damage himself. Ushiwakamaru has tremendous single target damage. Hans is a wonderful support servant, especially as you are just getting started. Cursed Arm Hassan is a really good assassin. Assassins are the dedicated crit star generating class, so they're really good for building up a lot of stars for any crit-based teams that you want to run. Spartacus is a really strong farmer. He was in my farming team that I showed that I showed earlier. He has the ability to charge his Noble Phantasm, as well as the ability to hit all enemies. As a Berserker, he takes a lot of damage, but he also gets a partial version of class advantage over just about everything, so in that way he's really good for clearing the first or second wave of most early game story quests, as well as a lot of events. He's really good for any time that you need to just wipe out an entire wave in one hit. And if you can give him a strong craft essence that starts him with a lot of Noble Phantasm, he becomes a very capable farmer even into the late game. Mash, I know, does not start out seeming very strong, but she actually gets really, really good. She continues to upgrade her skills, her Noble Phantasm, her stats, her level cap will all continue to improve as the story goes on. So I recommend you should always keep her at whatever her level cap currently is, and then every time that goes up, leveling her up to her new level cap should be a priority. She should also be the first servant whose skills you try to max out, because they're really cheap and they're really, really strong. Specifically, this skill right here, Honorable Wall of Snowflakes, is a massive damage buff that is active for 3 out of every 5 turns when it's fully leveled, and will go a really long way towards keeping your entire party alive against whatever you're fighting. And as you continue into the late game and enemy damage and enemy health goes way up and fights get longer and longer and you need to be able to survive longer and tank through a lot more damage, MASH becomes the MVP of the entire game as far as making sure that your entire party stays alive as long as they need to. So these are kind of the main picks of the servants that I would use. There are other good options, like Fergus is also a good saber, Robin Hood is also a good archer, Arash is pretty much a must-level archer as well. Proto-Ku, if you don't have regular Ku, Proto-Ku is like a more offensive-oriented version of Ku. He's not quite as good, I don't think, but he's definitely got his strong points. Medusa is another good rider. She's really good at farming. There are not a ton of great 3-star casters or lower. Medea is a decent single-target option. Babbage is a decent AoE option. Chen Gong is really good as well, although his usage is more suited towards the late game in spite of his low rarity. Kojiro, Fuma Kotaro, also good assassins. Lubu, Kyuhime, also good low rarity berserkers. And then whoever you got from the tutorial summon is probably worth leveling as well. Exemplified in that instance by Chevalier Dayan, who was on the far left, who was my tutorial servant when I first started the game. So as the game probably informed you when you were going through the Fuyuki tutorial section, class advantage is really, really important in this game, which is why I recommend having a servant in every class. Class advantage by itself can pretty much carry you through a lot of the early game without even having leveled servants. So when you come into a quest, it'll tell you the types of enemies that you're going to fight. It won't show you these if you haven't completed the quest already, but it'll show you the classes. Pardon. So when you enter a quest, it'll show you the classes that you're going to be fighting, and you want to build and change around your team based on what you're going to be fighting. If you need a reminder of which classes get advantage over which other classes, hit this button right here that says Class Affinity. This will show you the tree, and you can see that archers do well against sabers, sabers do poorly against archers. Sabers do well against lancers, lancers do poorly against sabers. Lancers do well against archers, archers do poorly against lancers. And so on and so forth. Berserkers do well against everything, but everything also does well against berserkers. Except foreigners. Foreigners do well against berserkers, berserkers do poorly against foreigners. So you can eventually, as you play enough, you'll memorize this entire tree and it'll just become intuitive to you. But we want to format the servants that we bring to any given quest based on what we're fighting. Now, when we first start the game, and enemies have like 3,000 HP and deal, 100 damage, it doesn't seem like this matters very much. But as you progress into the game, difficulty will spike, and there's a certain point specifically where it spikes massively, and then it continues to go up from there. So you want to be preparing for that, and you want to be using this early point in the game to learn the systems, learn the mechanics, and become comfortable with the idea that we need to build out a well-balanced roster that can handle any class of enemy by throwing preferably multiple advantaged classes or advantaged servants against it, such that we can go into battle with that bonus. So what is the class advantage? Well, it's it's actually double damage dealt and half damage received. So if you combine that, it comes out to a massive boost in performance, as long as the servants that you're using are on the right side of the class advantage equation. So in this case, we can see we're fighting riders and sabers, so we need to bring some archers and some assassins. We also have the opportunity during almost any quest to select a friend support unit. And that term is a little bit confusing sometimes in the community if you're just starting out, where sometimes people will say support to refer to a unit that you borrow from your friends list, and other times they'll refer to it as like a support servant, as in a servant that is whose goal is to support the party with buffs or debuffs or that kind of thing. The same term is used for both, so it's a little hard to navigate sometimes. But we're going to use a unit from the support list. We're not actually going to use them in my example, but they're going to hang out in the back. If you want, though, you could bring them in. The first three are the ones that were going to actually end up in the battle at the beginning thereof. So I've put together a party that's going to be able to tackle this quest pretty well. We've got an archer to handle the sabers, as well as a couple of assassins to handle the riders. I've got a backup archer in case my first one dies. I've also got a backup assassin in case one of them dies. And they'll come into the battle in this order, with the far leftmost one coming in to take the place of whoever dies first, and so on. You'll notice this number in the bottom right-hand corner called the total cost, and this is another reason why you need to value your low-rarity servants and craft essences, especially at the beginning of your account. If this was filled up with high-rarity servants and whatnot, I wouldn't actually be able to run the team. Every servant and every craft essence has a cost associated with it, which we've seen a couple times, but I haven't necessarily pointed out. You can see right here it says cost 3. And then a servant will have a cost, you can see for here it's cost 7. You'll notice that if I try to kind of recreate that team, use the same classes, but just with all 5-star servants and all 5-star craft essences, that my total cost is actually far exceeded the limit. And that's in spite of my account level being as high as it can go, and therefore my total cost being as high as it can possibly go right now. So even for a player like me, I often am forced into using lower rarity servants and lower rarity craft essences just because I don't have the total cost to fill up a full team of 5-star and 4-star servants. And if I try to use all 4-star servants but all 5-star craft essences, I'm still over the team cost or total cost limit. So you have this mechanic that is preventing you from exclusively using high rarity items. So I would need to knock a couple of my craft essences down to 4 stars to be able to use this team, even though I don't have any 5 stars except for the support servant who isn't counted against the total cost. So that's another reason why those low rarity servants and low rarity craft essences, it's really important actually to keep a couple of them on hand, because you want to be able to run a full party all the time, but you can't run a full party of high rarity stuff. So once we have our party and we're satisfied with how we've got it set up, and I have another video on sort of team building and how to select servants and how to select effective craft essences. In fact, I've gone over a lot of the subjects in this video in greater depth in other videos on my channel, so please do take a look at those if you feel like it. So we can go ahead and start the fight, and you should have done plenty of this during the tutorial section, so you should more or less know how all of this goes. You select the cards, and in our team we can notice that we have, for instance, 2 archers and a rider here, so we'll say target this one, use these 2 cards, and then this one, and you'll notice that once he... Never mind. If he killed the dragon, then the target would switch to the skeleton, and we would have got class advantage for that last Uriel card, where we would have been able to kill 2 enemies in the same turn there. Didn't quite pull it off, though. This is why it's good to bring, if you're going to be going against multiple classes, why it's good to bring a team of multi-classed servants, so that you can hopefully get a card or 2 of each one of your servants and have 1 or 2 hopefully class advantage cards so that you always have something to attack and deal meaningful damage to. And, if necessary, you can break it up like this to gain some extra benefits. By putting that Buster card at the end of a arts chain, we were able to have him gain a couple points of Noble Phantasm on his Buster card, even though that's not normal, and that's why he's now at 100%, and we'll be able to use our Mystic Code, which we talked about much earlier, to add some damage, and then we'll use his Noble Phantasm to finish the quest. So that's kind of how, in its most basic form, team building and running quests works. From that quest, and this was a free quest, we can see that we actually gained a couple of items. In this case, we got some QP, we got a mostly useless 2-star Ember, and we also got a Rider Gem. So we can use that to increase the skill of a Rider Servant. So farming free quests is where you're going to get a lot of your Ascension materials and skill up materials. You can see the list thereof if you click this little information button under the classes on the selection menu. In this case, we could, if we needed evil bones, we could come to this quest and get some of those. And you can go online to find very comprehensive lists of all the different items in the game and where the best places are to farm them, because the rates of dropping them per quest are not always the same. For a final closing note, I want to just talk about sort of the early game progression and how I think that should go to give you the best experience. In my experience, a lot of players overthink this to some degree. We mentioned a long time ago that if there's an event going on that isn't locked, like you have access to it, and some of them are locked such that you can only participate if you've made it certain ways into the main story. If it's not locked off to you and the difficulty doesn't put it out of reach, which you should be able to find out within just a quest or two, I recommend making that your main priority most of the time while they're available, because they're only around for a limited time, and some of the items or free servants or free craft essences that you can get from them are very, very helpful. As well as, like we said, the material that you need to take a skill from level 9 to level 10, which you want to be doing for any servant that you use really, really often, is something that you can really only get from events. There is technically one other way, but it's basically out of reach for 99% of players most of the time. So events are really good if they're open and if you're able to participate in them without just getting hammered. If not, the next thing to do is to balance leveling up your roster with progressing in the main story. So the way that I've settled on kind of recommending players to do this who want a very specific plan, I would say take those servants that I recommended, those low rarity servants, and try to level each of them to like level 10. And then start into the main story, change your classes around, as I showed, to best suit your party to the enemies that are featured in the preview. And just see how far you can go. And maybe you'll make it through the entire first singularity. Maybe you'll make it through the entire second singularity. You'll eventually run to a point where you're like, okay, my servants are just dying way too often. I'm not dealing enough damage. Battles are taking a really long time. So when that happens, stop with the main story, go back to the Chaldea Gate, farm some embers, give them to your servants, level them up, take everybody to like level 20, and then go back into the main story, see how far you can press. Again, you'll eventually hit a point where you go, oh, getting a little hard again. Stop. Go take everybody to level 30. You'll have to go farm Ascension materials at this point, perhaps. But take your roster of like one servant in each class and try to level all of them to 30. And do their first Ascension. And in this way, you can kind of keep yourself... you'll have a very clear indicator just based on how much trouble you are or aren't having, if you need to continue to level or if you're at a pretty good place, without, putting yourself so far ahead that you just steamroll everything, which isn't necessarily fun either. So that's kind of my recommendation. Try to spread out your resources, have a balanced roster, have a servant or two in every class, and keep leveling them until you eventually can't level them anymore. And then once that happens, pick a second servant in each class and do the same process and slowly build them up to their respective level caps. And as you're doing this, you'll be, rolling the FP Gacha every day, doing your free 10 spin. You'll eventually roll the St. Quartz Gacha and maybe get some higher rarity servants. I recommend leaving those until you have a pretty decent low rarity roster, though, because they're much harder and more expensive to level in terms of the materials they require, in terms of the QP that's required, in terms of the number of embers that they need for each level. Higher rarity servants are much more demanding in all of those categories, as well as not always potentially being stronger. With low rarity servants, they're much easier to get to NP5, which is a massive damage boost if they're a servant who has a damaging noble phantasm. With high rarity servants, NP5 is out of reach unless you're a much bigger whale than I am. And you guys have seen my account, so you know that that's really saying something. So prioritize your low rarity servants, level them up a little bit at a time, have a roster with 1 or 2 in each class so that you can take on any kind of quest, push the main story, and once it gets too hard or too tedious, or you just feel like you could use some extra power, at that point, take a break, go farm some levels, go farm some materials, do some ascensions, level up some skills, come back to the main story in a little bit. I would say you want like 1 fully leveled servant in each class by the time that you hit the 6th singularity, which is the first big difficulty spike. At least that's the advice that I've been giving to people, and it seems to leave them sort of well prepared. It's hard to emphasize, or for somebody to understand who hasn't been to that particular part, how big that difficulty spike is, but it is immediately noticeable, shall we say. So try to be well prepared for that by having at least 1, I would say, fully leveled servant in each class by the time that you hit the 6th singularity. Anyways, this video has gone on long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned a few things. If you did, and you have any questions about any of those things, please let me know in the comments or contact me on Discord. My Discord username will be in the description. You can send me a message. We can chat about anything that is unclear to you. Also, in the description of the video is going to be my follow code. As I mentioned, my friends list is usually full, but an unlimited number of people can follow me, so you can punch in this code that's on the screen, or if you like to copy and paste, it'll be in the description as well. You can pull up my name in the Friends tab right here, where you'll be able to enter this code. Send me, there will be a button that says follow, or it's like a yellow hand button or something like this. You'll be able to send me a follow request, which isn't actually a request, it just follows me automatically, which will let you use this support list as I have it set up right here during your Part 1 story quests. That's the first 8 singularities, so that should get you pretty far into the story and should help you get far enough in that you can definitely farm for a lot of different types of items and have made a lot of progress into the story. So should be pretty useful. If you'd like some help, if you're a newer account, like we mentioned a long time ago, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to sort of attract new friends. So the follow system was implemented as a way to allow you to not need somebody to accept a friend request for you to still be able to receive help from them. So go ahead and follow me if that idea suits you. and contact me if you need to. I'm always open to chatting and discussing things about the game that can be of further use to you. Anyways, thank you again for watching. I hope you're doing really well. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you next time.